Welcome to The World This Week. 4 Paris-based correspondents confront opinions on the week's major stories. Let me introduce my fantastic guests this evening. Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, columnist for the Sunday Telegraph, a regular on France 24. Régis Le Sommier, deputy editorial director at Paris Match. Tony Cruagnes, Paris correspondent for TV3, the public broadcaster in Spain. And Craig Capitas, correspondent at large for Quartz, the Atlantic Group, which is the new upcoming business and finance publication of the Atlantic Group, coming out this Sunday, so keep an eye out for that. You launch on Sunday.
QZ.com.
Let's start with this. This week, protests spread across the Muslim world against the American-made film Innocence of Islam, which ridicules Prophet Muhammad. Riots in Pakistan have left scores of people dead. Earlier this week, Hassan Nasrallah, leader of Lebanese group Hezbollah, urged a global mobilization to defend the Prophet. And the Afghan insurgents who claimed responsibility for a suicide attack against Westerners in Kabul this week said that they carried out the attack in protest against the film. And here in France, protests have been strictly forbidden. So, Régis Le Sommier, all week we've been monitoring the reaction to that film, the reaction in the Muslim world. Has it lived up to your expectations, so to speak? Has it been what you expected?
Well, it has been... to a degree we've never seen before, but it was. What's interesting once again is that when obscure guy make this movie, put it online, and then there's another obscure guy, a little more known in the Muslim world in Egypt, that carries some of the footage on his TV. It's sort of like super tele-evangelist imam that and then the street hears about it, and then it spreads. What's new with that is we have a combination of fast spread information, which is carried all the way around the world. Probably 10 years before, if somebody would have carried a movie like that in the U.S., nothing would have happened in the Muslim world. But this time around, there's this speed of information.
Because it can be viewed instantly everywhere.
It can be viewed everywhere, and it takes a little time each time. It takes a leader to say, oh, there's this thing.
And to then draw people's attention to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other ones feel like they have to react as well because they're Muslim and they want to prove the other guy that they are a good Muslim, and they want to protest. That's what we've seen this time, and I think that's what's a little new. Now, the fact that some Islamists are going to be offended by a depiction of the Prophet or some sort of movie is not new in itself.
It's not just some Islamists. We're talking 45,000 people rioting in the 5 largest cities in Pakistan.
Obviously, yeah. Well, in what I see, what I see in that is you find leaders in all those communities that drag people to the street, that carry the protest, and it's a touchy subject, of course, but it's the first time that we see such a thing, that's a widespread phenomenon, I think.
Anne-Elisabeth, what do you make of Western reaction to these protests and sometimes these riots and violence? It seems that much of the reaction coming out of the Western world has been focused on blaming the film rather than blaming protesters or rioters.
Yes, and this was even true in the beginning of the State Department until they realized, and they had information, all of which was explained in several pieces in the press this week, including yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, that the attack on the embassy in Libya, for instance, had been planned for several weeks and was completely unconnected to anything that they might not have known about the movie, but certainly the movie was used as a pretext. But by and large, instead of sort of looking at the phenomenon and saying, here are people rioting and killing people, we say, oh, it's our fault that they're rioting and killing people. And that's complete madness in the West, because then it means you're paralyzed. You can't do anything, you can't say anything. You are provoking rioting, you're causing the riot. So the people who provoke the riot are the people who are rioting, and the people who cause mayhem are the ones who are torching the embassy and lighting the fire and killing people.
It's interesting.
We should really sort of stick to our guns on this one.
Barack Obama released, the American administration released films to be broadcast on Pakistani television. They spent $50,000 to $70,000 on this. showing, and we'll see the pictures coming up on screen, showing Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton speaking. This was all translated into Urdu for the Pakistanis to understand, basically condemning this film. Tony, there was an interesting editorial in the Wall Street Journal this week where Bret Stephens was basically saying this is a case of double standards because we are in favor of free speech, but we don't want to say it too loudly. He's talking about the Americans. We don't want to say it too loudly, lest we enrage the Muslims even more.
Well, I would say it's more probably a victory of oversimplification, because I mean, I agree with both. I agree with freedom of expression, freedom of opinion, freedom of designing, freedom of films, of course, and say whatever we want to say. But at the same time, I think we have to be reasonable about what's happening around the globe. So that means not stopping ourselves of saying what we want to say, of showing what we want to show. But at the same time, we have to understand that we are trapped in an oversimplification of the situation. For example, I think it's not the first time that we are in this situation. The first big one was with Salman Rushdie and the satanical versicles. That was something that happened 30 years ago. The difference now is that it spread all over a lot faster, which let me hope that it's going to disappear faster as well. And at the same time, it's something completely different because nobody argues anything against the arguments and the novel written by Salman Rushdie.
It's
but
interesting,
at the same time,
if I
now
can
it
just
was something
interrupt.
to provocate. I think there is a difference in between the art that Salman Rushdie was able to give to the world with his novel, and there's something different in between that and what we're talking about now. It was something definitely going to.
Let's just listen to Salman Rushdie. Before we listen to Elizabeth Mute, if you could just give me a second, let's listen to Salman Rushdie because this is what he had to say about this.
I think we're weakening our resolve. I think that people's willingness to defend literary freedom, intellectual freedom, and so on, is weaker than it used to be. And there's a greater desire to appease and compromise and back down. There are increasing numbers of attacks on artistic, and not just artistic, but scholarly work. Literature, painting, intellectual papers written in universities, all come under attack from different religious interest groups. And the state caves every single time. The state caves in.
So, Tony, you're saying we have to be mindful, basically, of cultural differences. He's actually saying the state caves in every time. Greg and Elizabeth, I can see you both agreeing. Greg.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing on your screen here, if this is the best Allah could do, then I'm not very impressed. Look it, this is a no.
You're talking about the riots?
No, the riots that I'm looking at right here. The bickering children of Abraham, which we've seen for more than 2,000 years. Jews, Christians, Muslims fighting each other. Look it, the right to free speech is absolute. This is a no mythology zone. The right to express yourself, to free speech, does not automatically include the right to be taken seriously. If someone doesn't like what I'm saying on this show right now, or what Anne's saying, you know what they can do? They can turn it off. They don't have to look. And the hypocrisy of the Arab world in this it redefines the word. Try and open a church in Saudi Arabia. Try and be a Christian in Pakistan. If the Pakistanis, Muslims, want to chop off the nose of a woman who happens to take up her head veil, fine, go right ahead. That's what you do there. Go right ahead. Frankly, I don't really have a problem with that. It's their culture. It's awful. It's abysmal. But that's just the way it is. Free press is absolute. The people you see on the streets here, they don't get that. Is it our job? Is it the American government's job or the British or the French government job to educate these people? I don't think so.
All right, but hold on. Does someone on this set identify with the feeling of actually being offended by something, be it the film? We're going to talk about caricatures.
I really would like to make a point here, which is that if you're a believer, you believe in a God who's all-powerful and all-knowing and who's created us his creatures. And frankly, I cannot imagine how, puny creatures of God can offend God. It is impossible. It's inconceivable. If anything, God, I should say God would be mildly sad that we get up to silly things. But the idea that, God and the prophet would be weak enough to think that, we can offend them, that is, from the point of view of a believer, I find this ridiculous. That's one thing. Second thing.
And someone's going to want to shave your head for what you've just said.
Oh, well, I know. I've already received, I was yesterday on Al Jazeera, I've already received tweets.
Blasphemy is not a crime. Blasphemy is not a crime.
Tunisia and Egypt are currently suggesting that it be made a crime in the UN.
And it is already in many of those countries.
And that's fine.
We're actually in a global media like France 24. That means that what we say, what we hear, it's broadcasted all over the world. And this is just an example of what's happening. And that means that in 30 years, if we compare with when we're talking about Salman Rushdie before, everything is a lot faster, and at the same time, the development of the situations in different parts of the world is very different. So
they don't have to watch
Islam. No, but I'm not.
So you have to be mindful. Is that what you're saying?
No, but what I'm saying is that we haven't found the place for Islam to be in our societies right now. This is a problem for us. This is a problem for them. With that, I'm not saying that we have to repress.
Wait a second.
Wait
a second. This is not Islam.
Let's just listen to Regis here.
Just a second. This is not Islam.
It's a part of it.
I remember what Egypt was like 50 years ago, 40 years ago. I remember what great tracts of the Muslim world were. They were quite tolerant until fairly recently.
And they were a year ago. We were talking about the revolution in the Arab Spring.
On Islam. We are not talking about what Islam has been in the past. We're not talking about millions of Sufis who would never do this. We're talking about the victory of the Wahhabites and the Salafists and the most extreme and bloodthirsty people, and they say that their stunted faith is the faith of everyone.
And that's basically the argument that's been put forward by Salman Rushdie.
I just want to add something on the political side of this. What's interesting is we've seen riots all over the world, but we've seen it's an expression of anger, of deep resentment, and I think this cartoon, not these cartoons, but also the cartoons, the movie was really a pretext for, let's say, Pakistan. Pakistan has been angry at the U.S. ever since bin Laden was killed. They feel that they've been neglected. They feel like they have this army controlling the country.
And this was the opportunity to voice
It was an opportunity. Yes. They decided today that it was going to be a protest day, officially. Nasrallah wasn't existing anymore because the Syrian crisis has totally overcast that guy. He took the state, took the pretext and said
he needed to rally Muslims around a common cause.
I'm existing. So every time, and all those various groups took the pretext of this to actually wage their rage and really show themselves. So that's the political side of it. For what's been said here, the fact that the part what Islam should play in the Western world, how Islam should react, is a different ball game, I think. But it is also a very important issue.
Now, let me introduce this. Here in France, you mentioned cartoons. Satirical weekly Charlie Hebdo chose to add its voice to the debate by publishing cartoons of Prophet Muhammad, which also ridicule the Prophet and those who've been protesting in his name. Here's the front page of the magazine that just showed up on your screen. The French government grew very worried that this would inflame anti-French sentiment across the Muslim world, and it shut embassies or schools across some 20 countries. Charlie Hebdo argues that it's exercising its legal right to have a laugh. Greg, you looked at those cartoons. Did you find them funny?
No, I did not look at those cartoons.
I
saw the cover. They did not interest me. I am not a fan of Charlie Hebdo. At the same time, I am embarrassed that I was working and I couldn't go to Charlie Hebdo's office and stand there in support of them, because they need to be supported.
I think the question that some people have raised, Tony, tell me if you're with me on this one, is what is the point?
The point is, it's a free press. The point is, it's a free press. They have a right to do that.
They don't have more right today than they did before they published those cartoons? What point are they making by publishing the cartoons?
Let me put that in perspective. Charlie Hebdo, about 15 years ago, carried a cover with Hitler on the cover saying, "Now Hitler is cool." And was with a slur about the Jews. It was saying, "Sagaz les Youpins." That was on the cover of Charlie Hebdo. At that time, everybody was taking Charlie Hebdo for what it was, a very provocative thing. But nobody,
It's absolutely right.
And it was exactly.
But no one was getting upset about
doing that.
It's a
all
satirical
over.
magazine.
But also, you have to realize where it comes from. Charlie Hebdo was published in May '68, and what they'd done is they had a predecessor called Harakiri Hebdo, which was exactly the same magazine, and they had run a cover about General de Gaulle's death. General de Gaulle had died, and the week before there had been a fire in a nightclub in southern France, and so they said, bal tragique, tragic fire in a nightclub, one death in Colombey, and so the Interior Ministry at the time decided to forbid them, and the following week came out the exact same magazine with as provocative covers, but called Charlie Hebdo instead of Harakiri Hebdo, and nobody decided to touch that magazine. But I'd like to go back in history, because in France we have a tradition of political cartoons that belongs, that has existed for several centuries. And even if we don't go back to the cartoons against Louis Philippe, we can think of Le Canard Enchaîné, which was created in 1917 by pacifists against the First World War, and certainly Charlie Hebdo, which was created in May '68 against the power. And so you will find a great deal of support and even courage in France, in a country where sometimes we're not courageous enough, because people have grown up with this tradition of irreverence and the right to laugh about things. These are words, these are drawings, these are not actions. While I will always say that you cannot insult a group of people, you can't insult Muslims. If you cannot insult a religion, then Voltaire was fighting for nothing in the 18th century when he was fighting the Catholic Church.
But
I
the
do
thing
not want
is
to
that
regress to a time before 1750.
You put it in the exact context, because we're talking about a magazine that is published in France, and all this history is something that most of the Arab countries they don't have.
Well, they tell us that we don't know anything about their history.
But I'm completely for the principle of printing this
our
magazine.
culture.
Okay,
I
so
read it
culture.
and I liked it and I had a laugh at it. But at the same time, I think we already knew what was going to happen afterwards. So just, don't be as innocent as that.
So
I
we
think
should be terrorized?
Okay, we're going to have a break
We
right
should be
now. Tony
intimidated.
and Elizabeth, we're going to have a break right now. And when we
very
come back, we'll talk about the U.S. race for the White House. With 50 days to go, Mitt Romney is caught on tape saying he's not trying to get the votes of half the American electorate. Join us after the news for the second part of the show.